Peace. Hotep, Uncle Jasanib, Assalamu alaikum. What it do, black people? Hopefully everyone had a wonderful break. I know y'all were back on Thursday and Friday, but this is the first coding class since your break. Hopefully everyone's doing well. And y'all taking y'all 5 minute break right before class, which if you listen to this, you probably did. And we're going to jump right back into the Python waters here. We're going to have a relatively easy class, should be review for most of you. It'll be something new for one or two people. So that's where we're going. I'm going to start us off with a video that from I guess a private course that I've taken, but I think will be it's short, sweet, not too difficult to understand, and help us get right back into the flow of things. So let me go ahead and open it up. Y'all can see part of my screen, not the whole thing. Let's see. All right, so we're gonna start with integers and numbers. That's an easy way to get back started. All right, you ready? 3, 2, 1, let's go.
We've been playing with numbers as we've learned about variables and other bits, but let's talk about them a bit more seriously. In the real world, we all deal with numbers all the time. The score on the big game, how many days of vacation we have left, or how many cookies our favorite recipe will make when we make 4.5 batches. Also, in the real world, we often don't think about the types of numbers that we're using. We happily add and subtract, multiply and divide, whole numbers and partial numbers all the time, at least with the help of a calculator, right? Well, Python doesn't care what kinds of numbers that we use either. Numbers are numbers are numbers. The only possible exception is when we're dealing with floats. They're not exactly like the decimal numbers we all learned about in elementary school, but they're pretty close. Let's hop over to Workspaces and look at some examples of working with numbers in Python. We call whole numbers ints, or integers. Int is more common because that's the class name in Python. They work just like you're used to numbers working when you do math or anything else numeric, right? You can do 5 plus 5 and get 10, 2 minus 2 and get 0, 10, and then we use the star as times. So 10 times 18 is 180, and then we use the forward slash or slash, whatever you want to think of that one as, for division, and 8 divided by 2 gives us back 4.0. Let's talk about that one. 4.0. We call numbers with decimals, or points in them, floats. Notice that we got back a float when we did division. Addition, subtraction, and multiplication always give us back ints unless we're working with floats. But division always gives a float. Now this is a difference between Python 2 and Python 3. Python 2 would always give back ints if you used nothing but ints. Python 3 fixed that by giving back floats when appropriate. Actually, always, because they're always appropriate. Oh, and one other thing to watch out for is division by 0. Dividing by 0 gives us back a new error, which we have to watch out for, which is the zero division error. You tried to divide by 0, and you can't do that. So we'll need to be careful with that. We don't want to create any black holes or anything like that. So let's play with floats a little bit. If we do 5.0 plus 2.5, we get back 7.5. And 1.2 plus 0.3, we get back 1.5. Now floats work mostly like ints do, but they can sometimes be tricky. This is due to them actually being a human understandable representation of a more mathematically pure number. They can represent a huge range of numbers with a very specific amount of precision. This, though, sometimes makes them do, well, weird things. Let's do 0.1 plus 0.1 plus 0.1 minus 0.3. Now that should be 0, right? Instead, we get this number. And that looks way bigger than 0, because that's got 5.5. But it's actually not. Notice at the end that there is this e minus 17. If you haven't seen this notation before, or this way of writing numbers, it actually means that the number is raised, e stands for exponent, to the power of negative 17. That means there's basically 17 zeros between the decimal point and this infinitesimal value. So let's use the round function. Let's copy this. Highlight that. copy, round, and then paste. We'll use the round function, which rounds a float to the nearest whole number. And if we do that, we see that it's 0. It's effectively 0. Now, if we were doing some serious banking math with this, we'd have to be more careful, and we'd probably want to be using a more money-appropriate number type anyway. There are some of those in Python, but we're not going to get to them. Round gives us the integer that's closest to the float that we have. But what about if we need to make an int from a float, and we don't care about rounding, we just want the int value? We can use the int function to do this. We can do int 5.2, and we get back 5. And if we do int 5.9, if it was rounded, we would get 6, but we just get 5 because that's the int value. Int just chops off the float portion and just turns it into ints. Int also lets us turn strings into ints. That's assuming that the string is just an int. We couldn't do int a. That gives us a value error because there's no such thing as the number a in base 10. We can do the same thing with floats. We can do float and a number, and it'll give us the float value of that number. Or float and a string, and it will give us the float version of that string. And just like you did math back in school, we can control the order of operations. Now, Python understands the standard order of operations on its own. If we were to do 5 plus 5 times 2, we get back 15. If you didn't do order of operations, which says multiplication comes before addition, or if Python didn't do it, Python just did the math from left to right, we would get back 20 instead of 15. 5 plus 5 being 10, times 2 being 20. If we want that, though, we can use parentheses to control the order. So we can do parentheses 5 plus 5 times 2, and we get 20. Again, just like math class. We can also use the plus equals or the minus equals when we have numbers in a variable. So like, let's say we have age equals 34. We can say age plus equals 7, and this is the same. If we look at age is 41. This would be the same as us doing age equals age plus 7, which we're not going to do. We can also do this the other way around and do age minus equals, say, 5. And if we look at age, it's now 36.
Quick break there. I know this video is almost over, so I probably could have waited just a few seconds, but just want to let y'all know you should have your idle open. And this is a video, but I'm sure I probably have actually spoken to you before we all press play on this video. But just in case I forgot, because that happens from time to time, the queen will tell you that. I'm sure Killy Molly would as well. Just make sure that you have idle open and that you're following along. Keep in mind that the reason that we're learning this is so we can do some amazing, wonderful things with Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pi being that credit card sized computer that we will be exercising all of these skills with that we're acquiring. All of these Python skills that we're taking on and taking in, we're going to be utilizing the Raspberry Pi. We're going to be utilizing the skill set to operate the Raspberry Pi and do some wonderful, amazing things with that. Also, there are so many things that we can do that we really need to do with our coding acumen, just something good that we have in our arsenal of good tools that you have in your bag is what acumen means. So with our coding acumen, there's a lot of things that we can do, and I'll explain that in a little more detail after the video is complete.
And again, this would be the same idea of us doing age equals age minus 5. But we're not going to do that. So the next time that you have to take a math test, take some Python with you. Numbers are usually a pretty common part of programming. We end up coding a lot of things that have to deal with money or quantities or all sorts of other things that we have to deal with numerically. The int and float functions are really most useful when we're dealing with input from users that we can't guarantee the type of. We'll be doing some of that at the end of this course, so be sure to stick around. Now, though, let's see about expanding our cast of characters and take a look at strings.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. I wonder if I can just press this little arrow thing over here and it'll just start playing the next video. I've not tried that function, so I may try to do that here. So, basically, this is wonderful information to absorb and to know. And I always want to try to remind you why this is such key information because basically we're learning a new language, and learning a new language can be very tedious. It can be very hard. It can make you want to maybe, uh, pick up something sharp and, you know, start to point at your eyeball with it or something like that, something crazy, because your brain is being worked really, really hard because this is something brand new that you haven't learned before. So, just to keep you all focused on the reason that we're actually learning this is for Raspberry Pi. And I actually went to a store called Micro Center here in Atlanta because I had a laptop that I tried to go swimming with, and it turns out that laptops uh, are not waterproof. Long story, so I don't need to explain that. But anyway, I got a laptop wet, had to take it to Micro Center to try to get it fixed. And while I was at Micro Center, the Queen and we were roaming around there as I basically was in the waiting room of my laptop. My laptop was on life support, and I was feeling very, very sad. But the Queen said, "Let's go over here and take a look, see what's going on. Let's cheer you up a little bit." And I like looking at electronics that cheers me up. Kind of like a nerd, right? Yeah, I'm a nerd. It's all good. Nerds rule the world, right? So I go into this little back room at Micro Center, and they have all these wonderful, amazing electronic, I guess, kind of what you could use as a science project or just different things that you can do to stretch your mind and have fun at the same time. So they have like rockets you can put together and program them, little video games you can program them, and things like that, right? And so as I'm looking at this stuff, feeling a little down because I'm basically in the waiting room and trying to wait on the computer doctor to come out and tell me how bad it is. Will you be able to save my laptop, doctor? And so I'm feeling a little down, but then I come across this large bin of, guess what? Raspberry Pis, all sitting there in Micro Center. And so I'm like, wow. So they have three different types of Raspberry Pis. I don't remember the specific types, but there were three different types, and they had three different prices ranging from like 50 something bucks to 70 something bucks to about 90 bucks, right? Obviously, the one costing the most was the newest version of that. It had the most bells and whistles, right? The most um, the the most what would you call it? Just the most components, the most standard come along with in this box components, right? So I got excited, started looking at that. Turns out they got a whole bunch of books on the Raspberry Pi that was sitting there as well. So anyone who's in Atlanta, you can go to uh, one of the three Micro Centers we have here in Atlanta. If you're somewhere else, look for a store called Micro Center, or just look up, just Google Raspberry Pi in my area, and go to any computer store, and perhaps they'll have it there as well. But anyway, so I see the Raspberry Pis. I'm very, very excited now, and I start coming up with all these different ideas about what we can do. And then I said, I've got to let the children, I got to share this excitement with the children. And I've done that just now. And just to let you know, that is why we are learning Python. Don't let it get too boring to you. Don't let it get too stagnant. Um, just try to remember why it is that we're learning Python. And that is the reason. Also, and not to be on a soapbox. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next video, and then I'll explain another very, very good reason why learning a computer language, period, not just Python, is crucial as well, and how we can use that in the Black community in a very, very special way, and is needed. So let's see if I press the little button and go to the next video. Let's see what we got.
We have one more data type that we need to learn about before we can start building stuff. If you're like most programmers, you probably think of numbers and strings as being singular things. It's just one number, or just one string. And that's completely true for numbers. Strings, though, are actually a group of items. It's a bunch of characters all held together by the quote marks. Python has another really common data type that's also a grouping of things. That data type is known as a list. Lists in Python are a lot like arrays in other languages. Python arrays, though, can hold any amount of items and any type of item. You can stick numbers, strings, lists, and all sorts of things that we haven't talked about into a list, and the list won't care at all. It's the ultimate bag of holding. Lists, unlike strings and numbers, are mutable, though. That doesn't mean you can turn their sound off. It does mean that you can change what's in them. If you change a number, it's a new number. If you change a string, it's a new string. But I can change a list all day long, and while the actual contents of the list will change, it's still the same list. It's like my to-do list. The things that I have to do might change from day to day, but I still go back to the same list. This can occasionally lead to some weird behavior, but we'll avoid that. Let's go into Workspaces to learn about lists. If we're going to learn about lists, then we should probably make a list, huh? So you make a list with brackets. You might know them as square brackets or square parentheses, something like that. So you just put them around the things that you want. So that right there, that's a list. Each item in the list is separated by a comma. It's a little bit easier to play with lists and to see what all they offer by putting it into a variable. So let's say my list equals, and then we'll do our 1, 2, and 3 again. Okay, so now I have my list. I can't do addition with the list and something that isn't a list. So my list plus 5, I get a type error. So I can only concatenate list to list, not int. But I can do that, obviously, according to this error, with another list. So like my list plus 4, 5, and now there's that new one. But that didn't actually change my list. If I look at my list, it's still 1, 2, 3. I didn't do any assignment, so it just said, hey, what would my list be if we added this other list to it? And that's what comes out. So let's actually do that. So we can do my list equals my list plus 4, 5. And now if we were to look at my list, we've got 1 through 5. And we can, of course, do this with plus equals as well. So my list plus equals, we'll do 6 and 7. And now my list is, sometimes that doesn't show up. There we go. My list is 1 through 7 now. Like strings, we can't use subtraction or division on lists, but we can use multiplication. Just like with strings, it repeats the list as many times as we tell it to. So my list times 2, we've got 1 through 7, 1 through 7. Again, we didn't use any equal signs, so my list didn't change. It's good to keep that in mind when you're dealing with mutable things like lists. You really want to be careful about when you change them. So we can make lists, add lists to lists, and multiply lists. Sometimes, though, we don't want to use math to mutate our lists. There are 2 methods that we should learn about for changing lists. The first one is append. An append lets us add another item to our list. So my list, let's reset my list. My list equals 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, so there's my list. And if I was to do my list.append and the number 6, and now I look at my list, I have the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Sometimes that just does not like to show up. There we go. I'm going to actually exit out of here, clear, and then go back into Python. Okay, my list equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My list.append 6. My list. There we go. Okay, so that's what we did before, but just doing it again with a nice clear screen so that you can see what's showing up. Now, we didn't have to append another list. We just gave it that one item that we wanted to put in. And we can't append more than one item either. We can't do mylist.append 7, 8 because we get this type error where append only wants one argument. So now, how do we get more than one thing in there? Well, your first idea might be to append a list. But remember, a list is a single item in and of itself. So if you append a list onto a list, you get a list in your list. MyList.append the list of 7 and 8. I go look at my list is a list, and has a list in it. Not exactly what I wanted. We can try again, and we should try again, but with the other method that I said I'd talk about, and that method is extend. So let's go back to my list equals 1, 2, we'll just do 1, 2, 3 this time. And I want to add on some numbers to this. So I can use the extend method to do mylist.extend, and then give it a list of 4, 5, and 6. And now if I was to look at my list, it's the numbers 1 through 6. So the basic rule, if I want to add a single item to a list, I use append. Whatever that single item is, append puts a single thing onto the end of my list. If I want to add multiple items, then I use extend. Append for 1, extend for 2 or more. Okay, one last thing to look at for lists. What if our list...
So again, I'm going to chime in toward the end of a video just because that's becoming a habit for me. But I want us to keep in mind that this is a very important aspect. Now listen, everything that we're learning is very important. But if we had to choose things that were most important amongst the very important things, this would be one of them. Understanding how to navigate your way in and out of lists is very, very important. Learning how to modify and manipulate lists is very, very important because we're going to be dealing with lists quite a bit as we once we get the Raspberry Pi and begin to do some amazing, wonderful walking on water type things. So make sure we're paying attention and we're gathering all the information necessary, at least to some degree. Get to know it a little bit. So when I say list, you're not totally like, wait a minute, what is that? Are we writing something down on a piece of paper? Is this a grocery list? Is it a honey-do list? What exactly is this? I don't want that. I want you to at least have some kind of relative notion, if that's an accurate term, at least have some kind of general ideas of what it is I'm talking about when I talk about lists. So try to absorb this the best way you can. Keep in mind, we will be getting our Raspberry Pis toward the end of this month or the beginning of next month, and we will be using the Raspberry Pis moving forward until the end of the year. So keep focused and stay locked in and absorbing this information. I'm going to hit play here so we can go ahead and finish up this video, and then I'll talk some more, and then we'll move on to the next. I'm going to talk some more and move on to the next, and class will be over. Isn't that great? So we can move on, and everybody's going to grab another book and grab something to eat and continue learning, or go outside and do cartwheels, whatever you're going to do. Let's get going.
Has something in it that we don't want in that list. Like before, we had that list. List in list equals 1, 2, 3. You don't have to do the commas, but that's convention, or the spaces rather. You have to do the commas. There we go. So we have a list inside of a list. We don't want that inside list. So we can get rid of that by using the remove method. And we just tell it what to remove. So in this case, we want to remove this list of 4, 5, 6. And if I look at list in list, now it's just 1, 2, and 3. So with remove, you pass in the value that you want to remove from your list. Python will delete that bit from your list if it's there. If it's not, though, then you get a value error. This is a new error that we haven't seen before. And basically it just means that the value that you wanted wasn't available. We'll talk about how to handle these errors later on, though, so just sit tight. Lists are a major tool in Python. You'll find yourself using lists for all sorts of things and in almost every script you write. Like strings, there's a lot more about lists that we didn't cover, but you can check out the docs in the teacher's notes and find out some other awesome methods to use with lists. Next up, let's see how to turn strings into lists and lists into strings. It's a veritable transmogrifier.
Okay, so what I want to do now is kind of break up the monotony. I told you all I would tell you why. Another reason why learning a coding language, not just Python, but learning a coding language is so very important, right? Currently, there is I'm give you a little background to this situation, right? So everybody knows this little small website that has gotten a lot of attention as of late. And this little bitty small website that's just seems to be getting its feet wet in the public market is called Facebook, right? So I don't know if very many people know about this little bitty website called Facebook, but they're in the news, in the black news, um, about some things that they are doing to black people on Facebook, right? So basically, what is going on is Facebook is what you call a publicly traded company, which means it's on the stock market, right? When Facebook first started out, it was free. It was created by Mark Zuckerberg in his college dorm room. How the story goes, and so it was just wonderful. You can get on there, you can do whatever you want to do, you can post what you wanted to post. You were able to connect with people who were like-minded, maybe even bump into some people who weren't like-minded. And if you did not like those not like-minded people, you can just lock them out of your chat or off of your page or whatever you wanted to do, and then you can stay in your little Facebook bubble and enjoy the benefits of being around a bunch of like-minded people without having to worry about other folks, blah blah blah. Right now, they started off that way. They've become a publicly traded company, which means they are currently being traded, bought and sold. Stocks are being bought and sold on Facebook, um, on the stock market. And now, when your company goes from being private to being public, which means goes from being owned privately to now being owned publicly, which is what the stock market is: public ownership, public trading of stocks. Um, Now the company is, I guess you could say, beholden or at the mercy of the stockholders. And when that happens, whatever the stockholders don't like, the company must change. And a lot of these stockholders, because black folks really don't invest in the stock market like that, a lot of these stockholders are white. So all this pro-black stuff on Facebook is getting taken off. There's a movement right now to kick a lot of pro-black people off of Facebook. One of my investor teachers who is on Facebook, named Boyce Watkins, Dr. Boyce Watkins, he teaches finance for the purpose of black empowerment, right? And nation building for the black nation, for us. He's been removed off Facebook, suspended, I guess, for 30 days, and this is his second suspension. And then a lot of his friends are being kicked off as well for very, very, very small things, for just referring to an article of some kind. This is the point. Learning a computer language and understanding how computers work and being able to build and tear down online means we can build our own Facebook, and it can be called Black Facebook. It can be called Facebook for Blacks. It can be called We Do Our Own Thing All the Time, every day, where we want to, in every way.com, right? And it can be for Black people and by Black people. And whatever we want to put on there, we can. But as long as we are on white folks' stuff, they can do what they want to do. That's why I don't have too much of a problem with white folks treating Black people bad on jobs, because we shouldn't be there. We should be creating our own job. And if you walk up on somebody's plantation, you can't complain about how hard they're hitting you with the whip, right? That doesn't work. So basically, we are learning a language that will allow us to be able to build what our people need. Being on social media is very important in today's world because it allows us to connect, and Black people really need to connect. And if we do connect, we can strategize and come up with different ways um, to get ourselves together. So anyway, I say all of that to say we're learning a language that literally can be used to help build the Black nation here in this Western world. So understand that you all are doing something very, very, very important, and the better you become at it, the stronger you'll be as far as being able to help our people. So anyway, we're moving on to the next thing, and that's called being on your soapbox. See, I just took about 2 minutes there to just go blah to y'all and talk to y'all about what was going on in my own head, and I tied it into programming, which is wonderful. So we're moving on to the next video because I really want to make sure that you all are enjoying yourselves, and even if you're not enjoying yourselves, are you at least learning? Learn something, people. Come on. We got a lot of work to do, right? All right, so on to the next video.
We have one more data type that we need to learn about before we can start building stuff. If you're
What's up, guys? Welcome to your 23rd Python tutorial, and in this tutorial I'm going to talk to you guys about different ways to test stuff. Now, so far the only test I showed you guys is
Okay, I'm not exactly sure what that is, and because I don't like just throwing things up on the screen and I don't know what it is, I'm going to go here with it. And this is actually what I was looking for right there. So I'm going to go click, 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 right? And here we go.
So far, we've just looked at some basic data types and their methods. We're going to stick to looking at their methods, but we're going to get something a little more complex than just typing out strings or lists. I don't want to keep you away from the fun stuff any longer than I have to, so let's get into workspaces as quick as possible. When we looked at ints, floats, and strings, we talked about how you can use those types to make more items of those types. Like you can do int, and then a string that has just a number in it, and it'll give you back an int. So, you could do like str5 and you get back the string 5. But I didn't talk about that for lists. You may or may not have noticed that. Well, lists are a little bit special about that. Let's try it. We do list 5, and we get a type error that int object is not iterable. And that's right. An int only has one thing in it. It's not a collection of things, so it's not iterable. We can't loop through an int. We'll talk more about loops in a little while. Just know that iterable means can be looped through. Okay, so ints aren't iterable. Due to the magic of television, I mean video education, I know though that strings are iterable. I bet we can use list on a string. So we'll do a list of the string hello, and we get HELLO as list items. I was right. So we can send iterable things into the list function and we get a list. Cool. But I'm not sure how often I actually want a list full of individual letters. I mean, it's handy, it's there, but it may not be a thing that you want all the time. So let's look at the split method that strings have. So we'll do hello.split, and we get back a list with just the word hello in it. Now the list only has that one word, and that's because our string only has one word in it. Split breaks up a string. Now by default, it breaks the string on white space, things like spaces, tabs, and new lines. For instance, hello there, students. .split gives us a list with 3 items in it. Hello, there, and students. So that's pretty straightforward. We can just split up a string on spaces. And we can also tell split what to break the string on. Maybe we got a string from somewhere, and it has words that are separated by a colon. So we could have like red, blue, green, and we want to split those. And so we tell split to split them on a colon. And now we've got red, blue, and green. We tell it to use the colon character as the breakpoint, and that gives us this new list. We don't get the colons because those were used for breaking the string apart. Just like before, we didn't get the spaces, we just got the words, right? No spaces. Split also has an ability to do only a certain number of splits, but I'm going to leave that to you to look up in help or in the Python docs. Okay, so we've turned a list into a string. What about going the other way? Before I do this, though, I'm going to exit out, clear, and then go back into Python, because I want you all to have a nice clean screen to see this on. So if we have a list that we want to turn into a string, how do we go about doing that? For a lot of people, especially with previous programming experience, this is a little bit weird. But here's how you do it. So first, let's get a list. We're going to say flavors is equal to chocolate, mint, and strawberry. Of course, use any flavors that you prefer. Now, you're probably guessing that we're going to use the list and then some sort of combine or toString or something like that method. But we won't. We join lists into strings by using a string. And that's the part that a lot of people find weird. So for instance, let's do a comma and a space, and then the join method, so .join, and then our list, which is flavors. And we get chocolate, comma mint, comma strawberry, comma space. Since I used a string with a comma space in it, each item in the list gets a comma and a space after it, except for the last one. Python is smart enough not to put your joiner, whatever that string is, after the last item. The cool thing is, though, that we can use this with regular strings. So I could do like my favorite flavors are, and then add in comma space dot join flavors. And I get my favorite flavors are chocolate, mint, strawberry. Or you could use this with format, like we talked about before. I think this might end up being our most complicated line of code yet. My favorite flavors are, and then we have our whole, and then we call it .format, and then inside here we'll do comma space, join flavors, close. So this parentheses is closing for join, and then one more to close for format, and we've got my favorite flavors are chocolate, mint, strawberry. We did a function call inside of a function call. Good job, everyone. That's super common in Python. You're going to find yourself doing this a lot, but it's always really cool the first few times you do it. Using join does have one pretty common gotcha. I know it's bit me a lot of times. You can only join string items. You can't use join on a list that has no strings in it. So, for instance, I couldn't do, let's do plus sign, space, plus sign, space, dot join, and then the list 1, 2, 3. I get a type error. So sequence item 0, which is the first thing in the sequence, it expected a string and it found an int. So can't do that. So we'll have to find a way around that. Learning to use methods like split and join will take you a long way in using Python to parse data and create useful output. You'll find yourself needing to break apart and put together strings quite often, and these two methods are the best tools in your shed for that.
Okay, so I did my best not to chime in toward the end of that video and break your concentration on what the fella had to say. So I see that I've run out of time here, so I'm going to go ahead and close up shop and allow, if there is any time left in class, I want you all to go ahead and take the time to work on functional programming, which is the next assignment due. It's the next module. If you haven't worked ahead, it'll be the next module for you to complete. Take a screenshot of all the green boxes, basically, showing me that you have completed it, and then submit your assignment so you can get credit for it. And then we will be moving on to the next module, which is, I don't remember what it is, but it's whatever is after functional programming. And we're very, very near the end. So listen, there are quite a few people who appear to be below average when it comes to grade in this class so far. And so if you all are having any problems in regards to the class, I need you all to let me know so that we can all make it to the finish line together. And I will say this as well, there are about 4 or 5 people who are doing great. Most people, and then there are those who are not. So the ones who are understanding and putting in the work, showing me that you got it, those will be the ones who move on to the Raspberry Pi. But I don't think that your parents, as far as the students who maybe don't have as good of an understanding as some just yet, I don't think your parents would be excited to pay out to shell out some dollars, and then you're looking at it like, you know, like you don't know what it is, like it's a space rock that fell down from heaven and uh, from space, and you're looking at it like, I don't know what this is. Is it a piece of cake? Is it gum? Is it brick? to build a great building with. I don't know what this is. I don't think your parents would want to come up off them dollars for something like that. So if once we get to the end of this specific course in Solo Learn, those who are ready will move on. Those who are not, I will have a series of assignments, which is basically the ones we've already done, for you to do in order to get caught up. But we're not gonna two things. We're not going to bring the class to a halt for those who are not caught up, and we're also not going to keep moving and leave people behind. We're going to just have to break it up and handle it that way. So that's what we'll be doing moving forward. Hopefully, everyone continues to have a wonderful, awesome day. This is Baba Ayokunle, and I am about this piece. Hopefully, you enjoyed the class. And functional programming is next. And I'll holler at you later. Peace out.